Okay, so here, I'm gonna use the hammer. Okay, so let's call the meeting to order, and the first item is minutes from March 21st. Is there a motion?
I'd move for approval with any changes that are necessary.
Is there a second?
Second.
Go through it. Page 1. Page 2.
I have one on page 2. At the very bottom, there was a discussion of the following: encouraging commercial industrial growth. I think that was just really Mike's question and an answer, and I read this, it feels too much like we had a discussion about encouraging industrial growth, so I'm not sure how to either strike it, because it was not really an extended discussion, or maybe just put development instead of growth.
Discussion of the following topics.
No, encouraging.
Yeah, I know, but if we put the word topics in, would that imply that these were just topics we were discussing and we weren't advocating either way? I'm just throwing it out.
I don't like the encouraging part.
Okay.
So just strike encouraging and just put
Sure,
Okay.
discussion around commercial and industrial growth.
sure.
Okay.
I'm going to apologize. Actually, I wrote it in my notes and then I didn't. On page 1, actually, approval of the February 21st minutes. I actually believe it was just the 3 of us that approved the February 21st minutes, and then the others approved the March 2nd minutes.
I think that's true. Okay. Page 3. And page 4. So the motion is approving the minutes with the modifications that have been suggested. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The ayes have it. Okay, great. Public comment, general issues. This would be a time for anybody watching on Zoom or anybody in the room to speak on pretty much any issue. It doesn't have to be, it could be one of the issues that we're going to be talking about later, but it might be best to wait, but you can if you want. But any issues? Is there anybody on the?
No one on Zoom, Ted.
Okay, anybody in the room? Okay. Liquor, tobacco, and license renewals. Eric?
Yep. So I've included a second batch of liquor license renewals with the agenda this evening. We received some clarity from the Department of Liquor Control through the clerk's office. They had a new system underway, and we thought it was going to be 1 year for each license, even if it was renewal from the date of renewal. But they told us that's only for new licenses now. So everything is back on a year cycle of May 1st to April 30th. So we provided the board in February a first batch of renewals that the board approved that evening. We've now got a second batch of renewals. The motion I've suggested, I did a modification for my manager's report on Friday, is asking you to approve these liquor license renewals for a term of May 1st through April 30th of next year. And I've made that draft motion to encompass what the board approved in February to encompass to that April 30th timeline to put them all in that same trajectory. We've also had clarity that tobacco licenses also need to be approved in moving forward, so you have a second attachment with tobacco licenses. These have been forwarded to me from the town clerk. Staff recommends approval. You will see included in the list was one business that had a violation in the last year. The board's direction to me was to have business owners provide, speak to that violation and causes to remedy it in the future. So I include that with you yesterday for that establishment as well. So that's included in the list to consider this evening.
Questions, comments? Not the chair would be looking for a motion.
The chair like to have one motion as, or two motions included in one.
Given the lack of controversy, have one motion with both concepts.
So I'd move to approve the liquor license renewals as transmitted dated February 21st, 2023 and April 4th, 2023 through April 30th, 2024, and also move to approve tobacco license renewals as transmitted dated April 4th, 2023 through April 30th, 2024.
Is there a second?
I second it.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Great. Okay. Next item, National Opioid Settlement Discussion. And we have an Assistant Attorney General. In fact, we have a very excellent Assistant Attorney General.
Hello, Mr. Kenny.
Jill Abrams. Good evening, Jill.
Good evening.
Do you,
Nope. Okay.
don't touch the microphone.
Anyone who's ever
He's-
worked with me
he's
knows
worse than
I
an
shouldn't be
ang-
allowed to touch anything.
He's worse than an angry judge. So welcome.
Thank you.
And do you want to just jump into your presentation or comments? Or?
Sure, and I'm happy to do whatever you like. I can sort of give a high-level description of what the settlement is and Williston's involvement in it. I don't know if any of you were on the select board during the prior settlement, so if you were, you may have
Some of
already
us were.
heard this. Okay.
Others were not.
So, my name's Jill Abrams, and I'm from the Attorney General's office, and I'm the state's point person on the opioids litigation, which has been going on for, I guess, about 5 or 6 years now. And so the settlement that we are talking about tonight is the second nationwide settlement. So, Attorney General's offices across the country banded together and either investigated or litigated against a number of opioid manufacturers and some pharmacies that we found troubling and have reached a series of settlements. So the settlement that we're talking about tonight is with 5 entities, Teva and Allergan, who are manufacturers, Walgreens, Walmart, and CVS pharmacies. And each of the settlements has slightly different terms. They vary in length from 1 to 15-year payouts, and they total $39 million for the state. And the reason that I'm here is because for these settlements, there's a condition to any state getting the money. And the conditions are as follows. There's a base amount of every settlement that is automatically paid to the state and its municipalities, and then what's called an incentive payment, because the defendants would prefer not to pay all of the money, but if they're going to pay all of the money, they want to know that every municipality of a certain size agrees to release them from future liability. And so what they've said is, if a state gets to a certain level of engagement by all of its municipalities, you get Y dollars, and there's a formula for that. So in Vermont, in order to have the maximum amount of money come to the state, the 8 municipalities with populations over 10,000, 12 of our 14 counties, and 4 towns who are litigating have to all agree to sign on together with the state. And so the state has made the decision through the Attorney General to sign on. So we'll know we'll have some base amount of money. The way the money gets divided in this settlement, like the previous settlements, is that 15% of the money goes to the state general fund, 15% goes to be shared amongst the Vermont municipalities, and 70% goes to what's called the Opioids Abatement Fund. And that's a fund that's overseen by virtue of a legislatively mandated fund itself for the money to go into. And then there's a committee that oversees it. And the committee is headed by the Department of Health and has members on it that include 7 members designated by the Vermont League of Cities and Towns, so that there'll be a mix of small and larger towns, people with lived experience, doctors who prescribe medication for opioid abuse, and some other medical professionals and people who are expert in the field. So what happens is each year a certain amount of money will come to the state, and the money gets divided, as I said, 15% to the munis, 15% to the state, and then 70% to the abatement fund. And the catch for the money is that the money must be spent for the purpose of abating the opioid crisis. And I think to date, if my math is right, Williston has received somewhere around $28,500 over the last couple of years from payments from the opioid settlement. So this will be in addition to those payments. So I think that's kind of high level what the settlement is, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Questions from the board?
So signing on, we're just waiving our right to sue them separately. So
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And as I recall, we had, I'm not sure if you were on the board at the time, but we had a law firm come to us at one point and ask us to sign on, which we did not do.
That was before my time, but
Okay.
we did sign the most recent.
We signed the most recent
one. I was here for that, yeah.
Yeah, but the concept being that we would have that we would have a right to sue these pharmaceutical companies on our own or join other municipalities, and in order to, and Jill, correct me if I'm wrong on this, in order to protect themselves from all these smaller lawsuits coming at them, we waive our ability to do that, and we get part of the settlement.
Exactly.
So, any other questions or comments?
I assume Eric doesn't have a burning desire to sue them separately?
No, it's, as Jill shared, the town's received just about $30,000 from the first settlement that we signed on to. Staff is reviewing their certain uses for that funding, so we plan to bring back to the select board some options and then look for your direction on how we want to spend that settlement dollars to support our community and folks in recovery, and different options that we have here. And we would look similar if the town signs on to this, and when we start receiving those payments, making a plan, and then we'd follow through with it from the funding that comes in.
How long do we have to spend the abatement fund that we receive?
As long as you like. So there's no mandatory spending. Part of the settlement money that is coming in through the prior settlement is over 18 years. And like I said, some of these settlements are 1 year, some are 3 years, some are 5 years. So it's sort of a rolling source of money. But if, for example, you were to decide that there's a project that you don't have sufficient funds for now, and you wanted to save up for a few years and spend the money later, you're able to do that. So long as the money goes to abate the opioid crisis in some way, you can spend it how you like and when you like.
How do we determine what we spend it on? Is there any guidelines that we can find?
Yes, and I can send it to Eric if you like. So there is a document that's attached to all of the opioid settlements. It's like 14 or 15 pages long, and it gives really examples of things you can spend it on. You don't have to spend it on those specific things, but sometimes some of the towns have said there are things on their ideas for expenditures that they just, they hadn't been aware of. And so the first line of it says, you must use the money to abate the opioid crisis, including but not excluding these ways. And I think the list is probably about as long a list as any of us could think of. So there was a group of people across the country who came up with a list. But if you think of something else, you're certainly welcome to spend it on that. But it's got to contribute in some way to abating the opioid crisis.
Thank you.
Sure.
We've got a copy of that list, so we're reviewing it right now and thinking about some options to bring to the select board coming up here.
Any other questions or comments?
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So, what I don't remember, is there reporting, I read through the document, but it was a while ago, is there reporting that we have to do that to anyone?
You know, interestingly, there isn't, except there is a notice that will come out, I think it's going to be annually, that says if you've spent the money on something other than opioid abatement, you have to report it. So they're sort of doing it in the reverse. I don't think it's impossible that at some point, maybe somebody would decide to do an audit across the country just to sort of make sure that the money is being spent the way it should, but there is no specific plan of which I'm aware, but it's sort of out there in the ether that there's a settlement administrator that oversees all of this. And so I think it is certainly within their right if they chose to do that, but there's not a specific plan of which I'm aware. Sure.
So before I call for a vote, I did want to say I was only very glancingly in maybe one or two meetings with Jill when I was division chief in the AG's office, and I think this is they say that the practice of law is like an iceberg, that most of it is hidden underwater and you only see the tip of the iceberg. And so we're seeing the tip of a huge iceberg tonight. I mean, the amount of work that Jill did in the office too, but Jill spearheading it against these very, very powerful litigants is extremely impressive. And I just wanted to say thank you in public for that.
Thank you, that's very kind. It's been a privilege to do it, and I only wish it was more.
Yeah. So, is there a motion?
Sure. I move to authorize the town manager to enter into a national settlement agreement with opioid manufacturers Teva, Algren, CVS, Walmart, and Walgreens.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you, Jill.
Thank you very much.
Thank
for coming in.
Thank you.
Next agenda item, Chittenden Solid Waste District Fiscal Year 2024 budget. And I understand we're going to have Sarah Reeves presenting remotely. And Kelton, you're here for that? Can you come on up to the table and we will grill you relentlessly.
Grill Sarah. She knows all the stuff.
Good evening, and again, thank you for the time on the agenda. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you tonight about our budget, and I'm going to share the screen for a moment. Thank you too for Kelton for being there on purpose. I do appreciate that. Okay. Great, thank you very much. As you mentioned, my name is Sarah Reeves. I'm the Executive Director for the Chittenden Solid Waste District, and we are here to present to you our fiscal 24 budget proposal and ask for your support and, if you agree, your adoption. As a kind of a reminder for maybe some folks who might be tuning in at home or there in the audience who may either be new to Chittenden County or new to Vermont, just to tell folks who we are. We are CSWD. We are a municipality formed about over 30 years ago by the municipalities, cities, and towns in Chittenden County to manage the waste generated by residents, businesses, institutions, and schools on their behalf. And since this is our budget presentation, I also like to highlight where we receive our revenue and from where we do not receive revenue. So you can see in the pie chart, we have three main containers or buckets of revenue. Our user fees, or also known as our tip fees, and those are fees that are paid directly to us at one of our locations where we will directly manage the waste, so such as at the drop-off center or at the compost facility. Another bucket is the sale of product and materials. So literally the sale of compost that they make at ODF, and sale of local color paint, and recycling that is sorted by the materials recycling facility. The third main bucket is we call it solid waste management fee, and that is the fee that is charged at the Coventry landfill. It's charged directly to haulers when they bring Chittenden County trash to be disposed in the landfill. Where we do not receive revenue is directly from our municipalities, our cities and towns. We don't receive any revenue from your income tax, sales tax, or property taxes. I also like to let folks know how we're doing in Chittenden County. And this slide is actually based off of the latest waste characterization waste studies that were done both by CSWD and the state. So this is actually as of 2020. So I strongly anticipate that these numbers will change, particularly since July 1, 2020 was when that last part of Act 148 was put in place, and many more people started diverting their food scraps. Nevertheless, you can see this is a good illustration to show that while we do a very good job at diverting waste from the landfill, there's still a good chunk that we could further divert. So of the amount that is being landfilled, just about half of that amount, according again in 2020, probably still close, could go into blue bin for recycling, could be recycled as organics. Maybe you've got some scrap metal in there or some e-waste, or maybe something that's even considered construction demolition debris. So this is my pitch, my plea to folks to take another look to, before they put something in their trash bag, the trash barrel, to just take another moment to consider, is that actually where it should be going, or can I actually put that into a different stream and keep it out of the landfill? So our bottom line for fiscal 24, we are budgeting revenue in the amount of $15,401,763,000. We are budgeting expenses at $14,402,047. That leaves us just under $900,000, should all go according to this budget. And that revenue in excess of expenses then will get flowed into CSWD's reserves. A couple of years ago, our board approved we call it a waterfall effect, but it's a priority list of our reserves. And we implemented a minimum and a maximum on that. So if in the order of priority of the reserve, whether it be operating reserve, the capital reserve, solid waste management fee, et cetera, once that maximum is reached, then if there's still remaining excess revenue, that is then flowed into the next reserve in order of priority and onward down. It will land, all of it will land in the capital reserve at the end of the day. A short note about comparing fiscal 24 to 23, we are anticipating, or it's budgeting revenue just under 10% increase. We are also budgeting just under 9% increase in our expenses. I'm highlighting the one increase that we're actually pretty excited about, which is our administrative costs. The bulk of that increase is due to our new office facility. So we just this week have started moving into our new offices at 19 Gregory Drive, so just over the line from Williston into South Burlington. We are sharing space in the South Burlington Police Department, not in the department, but part of their building. And so that increase is due to a new lease expense that we have. So we're moving our things out of Redmond Road, and we will be there for at least 5 years, but most likely a little bit longer. This is a new slide. I don't think the select board has seen this one before. And this is it can kind of highlight how our programs are funded out of which buckets. So I want to point your attention to the operations programs, which are our drop-off centers, the materials recycling facility, the environmental depot, Rover, and the organics diversion facility. Our charter says that once we have a disposal facility, and we've interpreted that to mean the docks, the MRF, et cetera, that those facilities should generate their revenue from user fees. And we have further interpreted that to mean that those facilities should strive to be self-funding, self-sufficient. And we have struggled with that, and I'll show you one. That first bucket, the solid waste management fee, is one we don't struggle with because that one is basically just a charge at the landfill. It is remaining at $27 a ton, and again, that is charged to the haulers, and they pay that on those Chittenden County tons. I am asking our board to take another, not another look, but just to talk more about the applications of this fee right now. This management fee does what you would think it would do. It supports the management of the district. It supports outreach and education programs. It helps to pay for workshops, for example, that we provide, and the field trips that, and the tours. It also is the source for any subsidies that any of our other operations require, and that's, you'll see why we're trying to focus on that this year. Our materials recycling facility is not needing a subsidy, but we are needing to increase the tip fee starting July 1 from $80 per ton to $85 per ton. And this is a direct result of a new contract that we have with our MRF operator, Casella, and that contract went from $45 a ton to $70 per ton that we pay Casella to process recycling that goes to the MRF. The old contract ended last June, and the new one started on March 1st. So we are not raising the tip fee until July 1. So we'll be covering that increase in this last quarter. This increase of $5 is designed to try to recover some of the expense of that 55% increase in the contract costs that we have with Casella. We are budgeting for the sale of recycling to be still very conservative. And you can hopefully see that fiscal 22 line item material sales, that is considered to be an anomaly. No one in the industry anticipated the robust commodity pricing in fiscal 21-22, and everyone recognizes that that was an odd year. So we are further recognizing that in this year and budgeting, again, very conservatively. The markets are somewhat stable, but they are still suppressed, which is resulting in our, again, very conservative, hopefully conservative number. Our organics diversion facility, our compost facility, we are also increasing the tip fee from $65 a ton to $70 a ton on July 1. And you can see why in that last line item where it says income. In fiscal 22, we quite nearly broke even. We kind of considered that a break even. This year, 23, we are budgeting a $211,000 deficit, so in the red. And in fiscal 24, we're also looking to be in the red. And that large swing is directly related to loss of inbound separated food scraps that had been diverted to Casella's depackaging facility. So when they opened that facility and took in materials that did need to be separated from their packaging because they couldn't be distributed to the public, so they weren't for human consumption, animal consumption, for donation, and could not be landfilled, they did need to be separated and liberated from the packaging. Source separated material had also been diverted to that facility. So we've grabbed some of those tons back, but we are nowhere near where we were in fiscal 21 and 22. So that that negative at the bottom is another budgeting concern for us, and that's is paid for or made whole by the solid waste management fee revenue. Drop-off centers similarly have been running in the red, running with the subsidy for many years, and it continues to grow. The actual in fiscal 22 was just under $400,000 subsidy. Again, that was brought to zero through solid waste management fee revenues. Fiscal 23, we budgeted $422,000, and if we did not increase bag fees in fiscal 24, we would have another $421,000 subsidy needed for the drop-off centers. So we will be increasing our bag prices from $2 to $3 for a small bag, to $8 for a medium bag, and $11 for a large. The small bag is about up to about 18 gallons. The medium bag is up to about 33, 34 gallons of trash, And then the large bag is up to about 44, 45 gallons of garbage. And as a bit of a line in there for pre-COVID pricing, just as a bit of a reference, pre-COVID, we were at $2.75 for a small bag. During COVID, we decided, again, we didn't know what we didn't know, I guess, in the beginning of COVID, and we decided that we didn't want to handle coins. So we decided for some of the bag prices to go up and some to go down. We went down on the small bag as a nod to not trying to, further exacerbate some folks who were having difficulties at the time. But it never did cover the cost of managing that material. So we're going up again as of July 1. And a note here as well to say that the drop-off center system does represent nearly half of our employees and those associated costs. And an additional note is that materials management costs continue to go up, and those are the costs, the expenses that we have to haulers and for transportation to move materials from our drop-off center to the transfer station or to the MRF, et cetera. So those fees have all gone up at least 12%. So another change that we are looking to make as well, starting in July, is to shift all of our drop-off centers, with the exception of Heinsberg, to a Tuesday to Saturday schedule. And that is designed for several reasons. One, to give all of our drop-off center operators 2 days off in a row. They've never had that. Another is to make communicating the hours of operation much easier to the public. No longer would they have to go to our website and take a look at the checkerboard schedule to see kind of who's open when and where they can go. And then to make it more efficient for our maintenance crew to get into any of the drop-off centers on the Monday and to do repairs and maintenance, painting, things like that. The only dock that will continue to only be open one day is Heinsberg, and that is a condition of the lease that we have with the town. And this is probably not a surprise to anyone on the select board, but CSWD also continues to be experiencing staffing challenges. We are budgeting a 7% cost of living adjustment for employees in this budget. However, our total compensation per employee is only up 1.4% as compared to fiscal 23. And the way that we were able to mitigate some of those costs, because the benefit, healthcare costs as well went up pretty significantly, as I'm sure you're aware, we moved our employees who take the healthcare plan to a lower cost for the district, so a higher deductible plan for employees as of January 1. And we'll be increasing the employee contribution to premiums to 3.5% of salary as of July 1. So those moves did help to offset the very large increases to the healthcare plans and then moderated the cost of living adjustment. Not too much here on the capital plan, other than to let you know a couple of things, that there are some major investments being proposed for two of our drop-off centers, so the Milton Drop-Off Center and the Burlington Drop-Off Center in fiscal 24. And at the balance at the end of the year in our reserve will be just under $3.4 million. So that excess revenue that we saw in fiscal 22 from the MRF that was unanticipated, this is where that landed. So this is where why we're able to have a very healthy capital reserve and be able to continue to make these necessary infrastructure improvements at our drop-off centers. There is one reserve that we are not completely certain we will have an adequate amount to continue past its requirements. So we are required by the federal government to have a post-closure reserve adequate to maintain the closure needs for the landfills that we are responsible for overseeing in Williston. So we took on a responsibility for the town's landfills and then the one landfill that CSWD ran for a few years, and then wrapped that into a closure plan, and that was a 30-year closure plan. And we're at about year 28, 27, 28 on that closure plan. And we have enough in the reserve to make it to year 30 with a little bit extra. However, there are some significant unknowns, specifically how we may be required to manage the forever chemicals, so PFAS and PFOA, that may be in our leachate, which it's basically these materials are in every landfill's leachate, so it's not a surprise. But what we don't know is to what extent and what costs will be involved with having to treat that before it can go to a wastewater treatment plant. So we're confident that we have enough to work through year 30, but we know we will not be able to move to the next phase, which is a lower level monitoring phase of landfill life when it's closed, which is custodial care, because of this potentially very expensive unknown in how we manage that material. So this is an ongoing conversation at the federal level, at the state level, as I guess that you probably have heard of. So we are watching, and we're going to need to plan to augment this particular reserve because we're confident we will not have enough. And I do like to remind all of our member municipalities that in our charter, it does say that the legislative bodies of each member municipality must vote to approve the district's budget. So I'm going to stop my share and ask if there are questions.
Any questions from the board? Kelton, was Kelton going to be speaking?
Yeah, I'd like to just give a quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
As the
Please do.
representative for the past year, I think the district has done a wonderful job. I mean, as Sarah put there, it's been a very capital intensive few years. I think they've done a good job also looking at projects that didn't make sense. They were looking to initially build a new office here in Williston, but financially the budget just got thrown out the window with building costs, everything like that. That's why they moved to Gregory Lane. I sat on the special committee for the benefits, and we went through a lot of stuff as far as the benefits and trying to find ways to offset the COLA, but still, I mean, CSWD still has incredible benefits that they offer their employees. So it was trying to find that balance to keep the budget in line with such a large COLA last year, and looking as well at such a large, cost of living increase this year. I think there's big few years. They've modernized the compost facility. I don't know if anyone's had a chance to go there, but they've done a lot to modernize the compost facility and bring it so that you're gaining a lot of operational efficiencies. And I know the MRF will do that as well. So I think Sarah and her team have done a wonderful job, and I definitely would push everyone to support the budget, but I know Sarah's obviously happy to answer any questions, and I am as well, but I think they've done a great job, and everyone on the board has really vetted everything and challenged where challenge is needed, but also I think they've always had the answers when we have challenged different decisions they've made.
Questions and comments from the board?
CSWD's done a great job. I mean, this is a very important position, for the community, and so I applaud you for that. Is there where are we standing on the mandatory compost? Do we ever see that? I remember was brought up at one time. Have we ever gone into that? How has that gone? And also, I know that due to difficulties, you've gone away from compostable plates and silverware and cups, and I think I can understand why.
Yes, the mandatory, I'm glad you phrased it this way, actually. It's the last part of Act 148 was to direct all generators of food waste to keep those food scraps out of the landfill somehow. And so it actually doesn't mandate composting. So depending on what severe town you're in, you can have access to either drop off, like we provide. You can bring it to our facilities and drop off your food scraps. You can hire a hauler to collect those food scraps. You can compost in your backyard. You can compost at a community composting facility. Or some communities, I think it may only be South Burlington and Chittenden County, but will allow garbage disposals. So you can manage your food scraps that way as well. So it's immediately I would say within 3 months around July 1, 2020, we saw a huge uptick in the amount of residential food scraps being diverted from disposal. So, we heard from haulers who literally could not keep up with the demand for services. We were having trouble keeping up with the demand for backyard composting workshops. So residents really did pick up the pace and were paying attention and were asking good questions and were participating. It's been a bit more of a struggle on the commercial side. So that's where the opportunity really lies in further diversion of organics and food waste, is focusing now on the smaller generators of commercial food scraps. The large generators, they're there. It's the smaller ones that still need to, I think, have some more outreach done. So we're now turning our focus to those smaller commercial generators. And as far as I'm blanking on the second part of your question. I got the mandatory part.
Compostable foodware.
Thank you, Kelton, yes. We did. We stopped accepting compostable serviceware. And the reason for that was because it's very, very difficult for our operators at the compost facility, but also for consumers to be able to tell the difference between a plastic cup that is compostable and a plastic cup that is not compostable. They are designed to look pretty much exactly the same. So there's a lot of inadvertent contamination that happens with those materials. So we were one of the only composting facilities in the region and maybe even in the country that were still accepting those materials. The norm is to not accept them. So we've been working with the folks that we had done a lot of outreach to had switched over on alternatives and what could they be doing instead. So we spent about 1.5 years with the group of stakeholders and talking them through their options, and we have seen a dramatic decrease in the amount of compostable foodware and serviceware that is in the compost coming in, but it still does get in there. So we are focusing a lot on making sure that we're pulling contamination out at the beginning of the process and producing a really clean product at the end. But it was just the lookalikes were just too good. That was the issue.
And I think on your question there has been a large increase in food scraps since the law went into effect in diversion of food scraps from the landfill, as well as Williston also has a depackaging facility that diverts packaged material as well from the landfill, and then that can be separated to go to digesters.
Yeah, I'm pretty amazed at your increase in compost. It's a great story. It really is, keeping it out of the landfill. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions? Okay.
So I'd move to approve the fiscal year 2024 Chittenden Solid Waste District budget as presented.
Is there a second?
Second?
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. It is approved.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
you.
Thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
Take care.
Coming by.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda, Declaration of Inclusion. Pat, Crystal Lee. Good evening.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm going to apologize in advance because I'm probably going to do a lot of coughing. I'm recovering from an illness, but I'm not contagious.
Okay.
So my apologies. So thank you for having us for a few moments this evening. We are here to share our support and to ask all of you to consider signing and adopting the Declaration of Inclusion with the state of Vermont. We believe as members of the Racial Equity Partnership, excuse me, that a diverse community is a thriving community, and that Williston welcomes, values, appreciates, and honors all people, regardless of their identities, and that the Declaration not only would show our shared vision, but also enhances the values and the commitments that were adopted by the Select Board in October of 2022. We also believe that the Declaration is a visual way of sharing out within the community and in the broader state our commitments to diversity, equity, and inclusion and anti-racism by aligning with the state's mission and vision regarding diversity and inclusivity. And that by signing the Declaration, we would be advancing community and economic growth and creating a community that people will want to gravitate towards. We also believe that by signing the Declaration and advancing the work of the DEI and Racial Equity Partnership work, that we would be creating a community where people would feel welcome, safe, and have a true sense of belonging. And that by signing the Declaration, you would all be acknowledging a responsibility and an obligation to advancing the values and holding ourselves and each other accountable to a greater sense of humanity. And in addition to that, that we would be taking ownership in Williston for the work that we've already started and the work that the Select Board has been supporting. And then lastly, I would just like to share that by signing the Declaration, that we would be reinforcing our commitments as leaders in the community and advancing the truth that we must do more. And if we do that, we would be increasing, folks wanting to come to Williston. We would be bringing a more diverse group of people to Williston, that not only to visit or work or recreate, but a place to call home. And as of today, when I made a phone call, there were 104 cities and towns out of 247 that have already signed on. So we would be asking all of you to be considering this as an important piece of Williston as part of our DEI work and part of our visualization plan within Williston.
And I think I would say, in addition, I think if you were to look at the website, they can talk about adopting the Declaration and implementing activities and programs and advancements in your community. And if I sit back and look at the work that's been going on for the past 2 or 3 years, we're already doing that. So by signing a declaration, we're sort of codifying that commitment for the town of Williston and looking at that moving forward. I think we're also supporting the state. The state has a Inclusion Week. It's sort of timely. May 7th through the 13th is Inclusion Week in Vermont. And for the past couple of years, the governor's put out a proclamation related to inclusion in the state of Vermont. So it's probably a timely time for you all to think about that, to be part of maybe that sort of proclamation as it moves forward. And I think that it's, the implementation part's interesting, because if you look at the website and read about sort of the expectations that they're looking for, we're doing a lot of that, working with schools, working with faith institutions in the town, working with the library. We've got a town committee. So we're already moving forward. So this is just another way, from my perspective, of formally codifying that work. And this work has also been supported by the Vermont League of Cities and Towns, as well as by the Vermont Office of Racial Equity. So it's sort of coming together and doing that for the town of Williston. So we're excited about that, if you all are willing to sign on to that.
Yeah, and I don't know if all of you have had a chance to read the Declaration of Inclusion and really what we would be asking you to sign. But when I look at the language of the Declaration and I compare it to the town values that we adopted back in October, everything that we've already signed on to within the town is within the Declaration of Inclusion. So we are here to show our support from the Racial Equity Partnership and to ask all of you to consider this. And in addition, if there's part of this declaration that you don't like or that you want to change so that it's more unique to Williston, that is also something that we have the ability to do. So just wanting to put that out there and hear any questions or thoughts, feedback that any of you might have.
Thank you. Questions and comments?
Well, as Eric knows, I was a big proponent of getting Williston to sign the Declaration of Inclusion. This was something I felt really strongly and passionately about. We will be municipality number 105. And as I said, Crystal has mentioned, we've already been doing much of this work, but I think that this is an important show of solidarity for this work throughout our state, and that it's overdue.
That was frankly going to be my question is, why are we 105? Why weren't we number 5? We really should, as a town, I'd like to see us be more in leadership than waiting till half the state's already signed on.
Sometimes when you're doing the work, you don't know about all that other stuff that's going on because you're focused right here in Williston. So I wasn't made aware of this until relatively recently.
Oh, that makes sense then.
Yeah.
I didn't know if we knew about it and were hesitating to sign it or not. So that's,
Nope.
yeah.
Any other questions or comments? If not, the chair would be looking for a motion.
I'll move to adopt the Declaration of Inclusion for the town of Williston.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Great.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you
Take
both
care of
for
yourself.
coming in to speak tonight.
Yes.
Circulating a form that's a little dressed up with our letterhead on top, and I think we can like frame this and we'll share this around, maybe hang it up downstairs right near the window or something like that when people come to the town hall.
Great. Thank you. Next agenda item, Vermont League of Cities and Towns Welcoming and Engaging Communities Cohort Recap. Greta, is that going to be you?
I think Eric's going to present, but
Okay.
I can certainly add in.
So I include with the board just a recap memo in your packet this evening. So Williston was one of 8 communities selected to participate in the inaugural VLCT Welcoming and Engaging Communities Cohort. We worked with the consulting firm Abundant Sun, the board that was in place last November. Might recall a retreat with them, leading an initial policy discussion on DEI work. This group met 8 times. We kicked it off last October at VLCT Town Fair, and we wrapped up a couple weeks ago in Middlebury for our second in-person, and then we had 6 Zoom sessions in between. And this used Abundant Sun's EPIC framework. This is a strategic methodology based on data and science aimed at catalyzing organizations to build better cultures from within. Abundant Sun's used this model with hundreds of private and nonprofit clients around the world. This was their first implementation at a public municipal setting. So we used a cohort model with our 7 fellow municipalities with this work. And part of this was a survey. It looked at 6 criteria. And this cohort overall engaged 519 local officials using this survey. And it scores communities based on criteria of supervisor relationships, coworker relationships, respect, culture, organizational commitment to diversity, inclusion, and organizational advocacy. So one of the key takeaways from the survey for the cohort was that municipal workforces and volunteers are on par with other nonprofit and private sector organizations when it comes to challenges and opportunities for inclusion and belonging. So one of our takeaways and next steps will be to share this data with the select board at a future select board meeting, Williston specifically, that we can pull that out of the cohort data. Greg and I consulted on some key takeaways, just a couple to share. It's important to examine diversity in a broad lens in conversations, education, and policy making. This work in diversity, equity, inclusion, doing it at the right pace for the organization. It's certainly going to be an ongoing learning experience and journey. It can progress at a slow and deliberate pace, and we can always do better and strive to work and improve and do better. And we found there was immense value in this cohort setting with other municipalities who are engaged actively in this work. We've made a lot of great connections with other municipal leaders in other cities and towns. In Middlebury, we were talking how it's supposed to be the finale, but we said, it's really only the beginning. We plan to have this group stay connected, and spoke with VLCT and Executive Director Ted Brady about keeping that engagement with this cohort and helping to lead to other efforts and engagement moving forward. So working through this, some next steps, my thought for the town, I'd like to lead a development of an overall strategic equity plan for our town government. I'd anticipate this plan would focus on many different areas, for example, organizational culture, staff development, and policy making. It would define specific tasks in each focus area to work on. Think of this to serve as a roadmap to chart and measure progress over time. This type of approach is something the cohort was discussing a bit, and we can collaborate with other towns on how to formulate these strategic plans moving forward. There's some grant opportunities available from the Vermont Community Foundation to assist with this work. I know they have some grants available for towns if we want to bring on a consultant to help lead us through that process and engage multiple stakeholders throughout our workforce and our government and our policymakers. We've also looked at the organizational culture as, it's a key tenet of the EPIC framework here. And our HR team, we've been having some initial conversations about what some further staff development might look like, and working, just having discussions internally about our culture, what it means to work here, how we instill the town's value statements in our work every day, and how to recognize that. So I think that's going to be something we'll really be focusing on in the next months here from a staff standpoint. And just again, workplace cultures, it's going to be an overall important part of the overall equity plan if we move in that direction. And that was a key takeaway for me from this work with the cohort. Greta, anything else?
Yeah, I think it was a great opportunity for us to do some kind of internal look into the staff, volunteers, elected officials, and kind of the diversity that does exist within our town, where there's room for growth, where there's room for additional work, and to really kind of brainstorm that. And certainly there are places that we have seen some need for improvement, but I think that this was a good first step to really see, to really look internally and say, what are we doing, to promote, justice, equity, diversity, inclusion within our town, as an employer, as a place where people want to volunteer and want to live and want to engage. So,
Questions or comments?
I guess that's what maybe just talk a little bit more about it, because it seems very, I saw the internal versus external. It seems like is it very internal as a first step, or is this project focused on internal infrastructure for the town?
For the equity plan itself?
For the grant or the cohort or the next steps? Was it really?
I think it would encompass both, my thought. There's going to be some work on the internal organizational culture component, but also the external facing select board led policy making components as well. I think we talked about a bit, we've been engaging and having conversations, but I think if we can create a different roadmap of these areas we want to focus on and then tasks within those areas, I think it helps us stay on track, and it helps the community see what our progress is and what our efforts are focused.
So I guess another way to ask my question is, like, where would things, if we wanted to move forward on looking at non-citizen voting or some housing justice, equity kind of issues, where would those fit into this framework?
Yeah, I would look at those, encompassing town policy initiatives. So I think part of that would be the select board, and maybe consulting with some of your policy-making boards on some of those major initiatives falling under those lenses. I can see this being it's going to be a collaborative effort with many entities and bodies to work through where those priorities would be.
Because there's certainly one whole section of, like, let's make sure our policies are inclusive, right? And then there's the next question of, are we missing policies? So, all right.
Any other questions or comments? So there's no formal action required, but I think just the work sounds important and I think it's gone well, but is there other feedback, or is that pretty much feedback?
I think, yeah, I mean, I think it's one step in what's going to be a conversation, and that's going to, be part of everything, you know, the conversation needs to happen across all areas, and so yes, it's not, this is a great step, but it's part of many steps that we as a town need to take.
Yeah, I look forward to some conversations that more directly impact our citizens.
Okay, next agenda item, fiscal year 23 audit engagement letter.
So the board may recall at your last meeting, your consensus was to carry on with Sullivan Powers as our auditing firm for another 3-year engagement. We got the certificate yesterday, just came in from them, the engagement letter. The board would need to take action as you contract with the auditor to accept the engagement letter and sign it this evening. I know Shirley has reviewed it, if the board has any questions on that.
Questions?
We had a good discussion of this 2 weeks ago, and I think we had consensus on going forward with Sullivan Powers. So I move to approve an audit engagement letter with the firm Sullivan Powers for the fiscal years 2023 through 2025.
And authorize the town manager to enter the contract.
Yes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed signify by saying nay. The ayes have it.
And I'll circulate the letter with the signature page up the top of the board.
Catamount Community Forest Committee, Select Board Representative.
So the board has a vacancy for its representative on the Catamount Community Forest Committee. I think they meet once a month. Simon Miles, our conservation planner, staffs the committee. So it'd be for the board to look to consider appoint one of your members to serve in that role.
I would be honored to accept the position.
There's some question if you were just scratching your nose last time we talked.
I'll move to appoint Mike Isham as the Select Board's representative on the Catamount Community Forest Management Committee.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you, really.
I enjoy the woods working.
CCRPC Transportation Advisory Committee Alternative Appointment. Eric?
Yep. So we have an opening for this regional committee. Typically, the Assistant Public Works Director serve in this role. Public Works Director Bruce Hoare is our primary representative. Looking for the board to consider a motion to appoint our newly promoted Assistant Public Works Director, Christine Doherty, to serve in this role.
Any discussion? Questions, comments? If not, Chair would look for a motion.
I move to appoint Christine Doherty as the alternate representative to the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission Transportation Advisory Committee.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there further discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Okay. Manager's report.
I'll be brief. Just to highlight from my written reports, I want to congratulate and thank our administrative assistant in our assessor's office, Debbie Greer. She retired this past week after 10 years of great service to the town, supporting all the efforts in our assessor's office. So we were able to see her off with a little celebration last week. I just want to publicly thank her for her service to Williston. And just a quick update, Community Center Scoping and Library Assessment Steering Committee, still needing a more catchy name than that, but work is underway still. A lot of good conversations I know are taking place, and we'll continue to push ahead.
I think the name is the ongoing joke at this point. It will never be changed, but there are going to be a couple open public sessions. If you all haven't had the chance to be interviewed for this study, I encourage you to to come next Thursday, the 6th and the 10th. I will be here, and hopefully somebody else will be joining me from 6 to 8 p.m. to do interviews. So if you have a moment to stop by, feel free.
I've been asked like 4 times already, so I only did it once though.
That's all I have this evening, Mr. Chair.
Great. So we do have actually 2 items that we would be very wise to go into executive session on. So in order to facilitate that, the chair would ask for a motion.
Greta, you have to do this. You're really good at it.
I'm going to do it, yeah.
That's a long one.
All right, I'll move to find that premature public knowledge regarding attorney-client communications and a labor relations agreement with employees would clearly place the town at a substantial disadvantage, and further move that we enter executive session to discuss a labor relations agreement with employees and a contract matter under the provisions of Title I, Sections 313, A1F, and Title I, Sections 313A1B of the Vermont statutes, and invite Town Attorney David Rue, Public Works Director Bruce Hoare to join for attorney-client communications, and Police Chief Patrick Foley, Police Lieutenant Josh Moore, and Finance HR Director Shirley Goodell Lackey for the labor relations agreement with employees, and Town Manager Eric Wells to join for both discussions.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
There opposed? There's nobody? So we are going to go into executive session, and we will not be coming back into regular session at the conclusion of it. So that.